In a way, a part of Grande Prairie history repeats itself during the school year every Tuesday night since 1951. It's 6:30 or 1830 hours. The cadet in charge marches to the center of the parade square at D Company Armory and calls out, "Squadron, fall in." The parade of 577 Squadron Royal Canadian Air Cadets of Grande Prairie, better known as the Dragon Riders, begins. The squadron motto, translated from the Latin, reads, "On the Wings of Discipline." This video scrapbook outlines the history. Over the past 70 years, several hundred high school youth from Grande Prairie and the area have been involved in the squadron and been shaped by their cadet training and experience. What began as an adjunct to the Royal Canadian Air Force during the Cold War quickly became one of the most successful youth movements in Canadian history. As their commander-in-chief, Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, recalled, there was a very practical reason for the formation of an Air Cadet League, during the war years especially, as recruits for the Air Force. The Royal Air Force in Great Britain introduced an Air Cadet League in 1938, which grew to 200 squadrons by 1941, tied directly to recruiting aircrew. Later that year, when Canada announced its own Dominion Air Cadet program, hundreds of young men and girls lined up to join. On 11th November 1940, the Canadian Air Cadet League was promulgated in Privy Council Order 6647. The units grew to 23,000 teenagers in 315 squadrons by 1943. Eventually, 6,000 more youth joined up in the next year, and after the war, when the regular forces largely demobilized, the Air Cadets went through a major contraction, but in 1946 was begun again, when, as a result, 11,000 cadets and 155 squadrons carried on. Nevertheless, the Royal Canadian Air Force wanted to encourage air-mindedness among the young people of Canada and continued to reinforce the place of citizenship by participation in aviation. The Canadian North, after all, offered employment and adventure and the prospect of careers in civilian aviation, which also was an incentive for people to join Air Cadets and acquire some familiarity with aviation. Wherever community leaders, many of them veterans, promoted aviation, Air Cadet work was a valuable outlet for them to volunteer, and until the 1960s, young women as well as men, especially in Alberta and British Columbia, were part of the movement. As the years of the 1950s went by, the paving of local runways by the Department of Transport and regular appearance of Air Force, Army, and Navy recruiters at the Veterans Land Offices reminded Grande Prairie that it had a serious role to play in what became the Cold War, with the Civil Defense Team and Aircraft Observer Corps being formed. The construction of a radar installation for aircraft control on Saskatoon Mountain, Station Beaver Lodge, operated first by the United States, later by the Royal Canadian Air Force, would play a unique role in creating air-mindedness in the region, and also provided a base from which many could, as volunteers, supply transportation and leadership to the young people who wanted to form cadet squadrons in Beaver Lodge, Sexsmith, and Grande Prairie. In the Peace Country, the June Air Cadet-sponsored air shows of 1950 and 53, promoted in the local newspapers, gave the new squadrons in Sexsmith, Peace River, Rycroft, and Berwyn prominence and glamour, with demonstrations of marching, band concerts, inspections, and the presentation of badges by the air officer in command of Northwest Air Command, RCAF, with fly-bys of RCAF planes, barnstorming, stunt flying. Canadians and young cadets at the air shows were already attracted to join, and some summer camps were being offered for cadets to travel to places like Abbotsford and Gimli, Manitoba. Grande Prairie youth between 14 and 18 years of age first joined 215 Squadron in Sexsmith in 1950, and up until 1953 there was a sub-flight of 215 Squadron, which consisted of youth and leaders from Grande Prairie. But growth was quick. 75 cadets paraded in Sexsmith, but 45 came from Grande Prairie and attended an open house in 1953. As a result, late in 1953, the Air Cadet League of Canada authorized the formation of a separate squadron, 577. Training would take place in D Company Armory, shared with the local militia unit, and later with the Army Cadets. Soon they were joined by the Sea Cadets, but that is another story. That summer, 9 cadets from Grande Prairie attended Abbotsford for 2 weeks. Each promised 2 precious hours in an RCAF-supplied transport aircraft. While the Air Force provided uniforms and training, each squadron needed a community sponsor, often the Canadian Legion, but 577 found a lifelong sponsor in the Grande Prairie Rotary, initiated by Mr. Armand Kastner, first official Rotary liaison to 577, and the squadron commander, Lieutenant McMillan, also a Rotarian. The Grande Prairie chapter has faithfully provided support, funds, personnel, and in return, the squadron sometimes became the hands and feet of a variety of Rotary community projects. As one Rotarian representative, Paul Galway, later put it, there was a feeling of ownership, of close and mutual attachment between the squadron as one of Rotary's oldest community projects. One of Grande Prairie's longest-serving Rotary liaisons, William Beattie, eventually led the Air Cadet League Northwest Zone, while Paul Galway followed him at the zone level. In 1954, the Air Cadets of Alberta had 45 squadrons with a strength of 2,137 cadets. 577, for its part, averaged around 50 cadets with 8 adult officers during these years. Though it would grow to over 100 in number several times in its history, the squadron average was around 75 that attended parade nights. Often local members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police lent their expertise, especially on the shooting range, for the marksmanship component. The Mounted Police have also, like the Rotary, played a key role in 577 life and lent more than one officer as squadron leader over the years. By the end of 1954, the squadron also had been supplied with musical instruments by the town council, and a former Army bandmaster, Stan Hillman, began instruction. That November, the squadron paraded to the local cenotaph for Remembrance Day, another tradition added to the annual cycle. During the years, the Air Cadet look was distinctly military. They wore Air Force battle dress, learned to march as a military unit, mastered aviation and survival skills which might prepare them for a military career. And in the 1950s, there was an obvious reason for this. On several occasions, Air Force aircraft would come and visit. Air Force personnel would come and offer liaison lectures. The cadets were offered tours of these vehicles, though not rides in the aircraft, service aircraft. One exceptional day in those early years saw 2 B-25 Mitchell bombers from Edmonton's tactical squadron arrive, and over 40 cadets, after being shown the aircraft, were driven out to the golf course, then on Richmond Hill, for a bombing demonstration with flour containers. Still, the Air Cadet League reassured parents that the overall training plan was to encourage aviation, not military service, and justified its Air Force culture and discipline as the best way to ensure good quality instruction, high standards, and avoiding the pitfall, as the authorities put it, of too permissive a regime. Cadets who stuck with it were rewarded. 36 from 577 received promotions in the next few years. Several went to summer camp, and on 1st of May every year, an excitement would develop in the squadron as announcements were made over who was going to camp and who was posted to receive especially the flying training. 100 senior leadership cadets were sent to Camp Borden from across Canada, while 40 more picked from across Canada would also compete against cadets from the United States, and another 58 would be sent on exchange trips to other cadet units outside Canada. In all of these, many Grande Prairie cadets took part. From the outset of the squadron, many cadets especially attended the Western Annual Summer Camp held at Sea Island, Abbotsford, later at Penhold over the years, beginning with Murray Ford, Gordon Switzer, and James Orr. At the large summer camps held at Sea Island near Vancouver, Grande Prairie cadets often had their first far-from-home adventure, living with hundreds of cadets from across Western Canada with swimming, athletic competition, more marching, trying their hands at and mostly crashing the DC-3 simulator and experiencing those special 1 or 2 hour flights in DC-3s, later de Havilland Otters and Beechcraft Expeditors, the first of many familiarization flights held at camp and later at Grande Prairie Airport over the years. The cadets did not forget their coveted hours in the transport and training aircraft, especially at camp, where each, wearing a parachute and supplied with a small bag, just in case, were given a few precious minutes of instruction at the controls. They came home full of stunts, tales of their exploits, some permitted and some not, a deep tan, and friendships. Parents who had reservations about their children being over-prepared for war nevertheless accepted the situation, encouraged perhaps by well-known and trusted veterans in the community offering leadership, and also the addition of girls to the outfit. As many as 35 in 1955 young women served in the squadron until their part in the program was terminated in the 1960s. With their own leader, Marion Hiller, they took part in rifle drill, navigation, and signal classes. They appear in newspaper coverage of annual inspections in their Air Force tartan kilt and battle dress, reporters noting their participation in signals, first aid training, and marching. They participated under the general understanding of separate but equal, though their early, somewhat limited role, as we said, would not last. The squadron played a prominent role in the local news. National Cadet Week encouraged the Army, Sea, and Air Cadets to put their best foot forward. For the Air Cadets, this included a church parade down the main street, led by their commanding officer, with detachments peeling off to either the Roman Catholic or United Churches for service. And so during the Cold War in the 1950s, when the Cold War was in fact fresh, the roots of squadron culture and tradition were being planted. Training season began in the fall, as harvest ended and high school began. First parades included issuing uniforms provided by the Air Force supplies, learning awkwardly the dance that was drill, and studiously polishing their new or sometimes well-used boots to that shiny standard for which they are still famous. The winter's drill was practice for marching, for the annual parade and inspection by the guest reviewing officer, while classes and examinations and competitions for spots at summer camp took place. During the summer, those cadets not at camp would be occupied assisting at air shows, such as the 1960 Grand Prairie Air Show, where they sold programs to raise funds for the City Aero Club, visiting with guest pilots too, such as Alberta's famous Milt Haradance, who demonstrated his P-51 Mustang. There must have been days when the round of drill and uniform inspections, learning etiquette, military etiquette, studying aircraft types and basic airmanship, Morse code, ground school, and first aid must have seemed tedious. But there was incentive which they found irresistible. Daily they could hear the drone, later the whistling in the skies, which promised adventure. There was also the sense of belonging, of earning approval and credit from their peers and from the Air Cadet League for substantial achievements, progress in learning and accomplishment in weekly training, and always the lure of flying. Putting the air in Air Cadets, however, required more than passenger flights. In other nations with older Air Cadet institutions, basic pilotage was taught in gliders. Soon each squadron entered cadets qualified in ground school for glider instruction each summer. Powered flight followed, and at last in 1956, Flight Sergeant James Orr became the first of many Grande Prairie cadets to earn the coveted private pilot's wings. Along with the culture of discipline came the drive to compete and to excel. As Squadron 577 acquired a reputation, first in northern Alberta and later across the province, Flight Sergeant Alex Robertson took the Harry Francis Award for the Alberta Cadet with top marks as drill instructor. Went to the course especially for drill instructors set up in Camp Borden for several weeks that summer. Building the squadron reputation on the drill floor, Sam Matheson in 1960 attended the 2-month drill instructor course at Borden as well. Squadron cadets proved the ability to excel in winning coveted places in advanced training courses in aviation technology and also in drill. Wayne Monkman was the winner of a swimming competition at Sea Island in 1960. In later years, Monkman would pursue an Air Force career. With success in zone competitions, courses in technical trades, came rewards. Flights to Namao Air Force Base near Edmonton in transport aircraft like the Flying Boxcar. During the 1960s, the squadron carried on weekly training, drill courses in preparation for the competition to win places in the summer camps went on. Grand Prairie cadets can be placed in many of the photographs and articles of the Herald Tribune, covering camps, annual inspections, awards, and distinctions, and featuring the presence of Rotary support, by then personified in the presence of their representatives on the reviewing stands. Sometimes inspecting officers would arrive for the annual inspection in their own squadron aircraft or in RCAF vehicles, and on one memorable occasion, Rotary Club head Armand Kastner, squadron drill instructor as well, was presented with the squadron's RCAF ensign by the Air Cadet League. 1965 also featured the bringing of a gliding school to Penholz in the summer. Later, gliding instruction was moved to the old Air Force Base at Gimli, Manitoba. Since then, the Air Cadet League has graduated around 300 qualified glider pilots a year across Canada, and usually one of these would be from 577. In the 1970s, also 577 cadets showed their skills in the air. By 71, basic gliding familiarization had come to the local airport, where cadets were instructed in basic airmanship at home, though gliding licenses were still earned at Gimli each summer. At the same time, several cadets progressed to powered flight, receiving the coveted wings that mark them out from others. The 1970s saw an independence and entrepreneurial approach begin. There was a new cadet commanding officer, Larry Johnson, and a young Murray driver who was excellent drill coach. As warrant officer, he led the team in skilled compulsory drill and, of course, the free competition or silent drill, which required memory, practice, 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 and more practice. Cadets who participated in the silent drill team often talk about remembering, even in their sleep, the steps, the timing, the cadence that was required. Johnson also captured the imagination and about 900 hours of volunteer labor when in 1969 he brought in a battered airframe of an Ironka Champ aircraft and began its restoration as a group project. In December 1998, the aircraft, registered as CF Mox, made its maiden flight. It was a proud annual parade the next year when 577 could display its very own aircraft at the airport inspection. Though Mox, as it was affectionately called, was irreparably damaged in a forced landing soon after, the experiment in aviation construction especially stimulated the interest of cadets, especially Geordie Carlson, who went on to develop several home-built forms of aircraft over the years and become an entrepreneur himself in civilian aviation. Led by Murray Driver, the squadron dominated the provincial competitions in the 1970s, winning 4 competitions in quick succession. These were the years characterized by the leadership of the boys from Wembley and their pals, who made up about 20 members of the squadron. Darren Ekstrom, the 4 Sask brothers, after 1973, when 12-year-olds were permitted to enroll, and Joe Sask, Murray Driver, and his brothers, who had previously been in the Fairview Squadron, and Bruce Ramage piled in. 577, in fact, boasted the only squadron in Canada with 4 brothers enrolled at the same time, as well as the Sliger, Ramage, and Carlson brothers. Darcy Rautenstrach and others filled up the van from Wembley, provided by Major North from Station Beaver Lodge, every Tuesday as it made its way in from Beaver Lodge in Wembley. They, along with Driver and others, relentlessly practiced drill, applied coats of dope to mocks, practiced repeatedly their precision silent drill routine, and filled out the bugle band. They competed for perfect attendance, high achievement grades, and worked hard to succeed. In the anti-military times, especially at Beaver Lodge High School, their classmates would single them out for teasing because of their short haircuts. But they were able to hang together, support themselves, brag about the free haircuts provided by the sympathetic barber locally, and they had, as a result, the confidence and esprit de corps to pursue their cadet goals. They took satisfaction in defeating especially the larger Calgary units, both on the drill square and in board and ball provincial contests. The squadron had by then grown large enough to warrant a warrant officer, first class, which Bruce Ramage qualified for. In 1975, Ralph Sleeger, Corey Lambert, and James Manning competed and completed their flight scholarships, receiving the coveted wings. Lambert graduated from the Edmonton Flying Club, which hosted the cadet school, aiming for the Air Force. Nevertheless, other cadets with wings leaned towards a commercial or a simple private flying career. Darren Ekstrom earned his wings in 1971. Ekstrom succeeded despite a hard landing, which led to his aircraft being destroyed by fire. Having escaped injury, within 2 hours, he was back in the air. Convinced by his instructors that, like falling off a horse, the new rider must get right back on. After graduation, he was permitted to bring home his old propeller as a keepsake. All the graduates, both of gliding and powered flight, have shared one characteristic, that great big wide grin which they wear after their first solo flight. Marksmanship, because of the shooting range attached to the Armory, also received quite a bit of attention from the cadets, and also in the 70s media attention when 3 5.77 cadets entered and succeeded in the Junior Shooters Club competition and came away champions. That year, another cadet with great ambition and promise for a career in aviation was promoted to corporal. Robert Pardell, high-spirited and gifted young man, was promoted to corporal. He would become one of 5.77's most famous graduates with a unique and ultimately tragic fate. Ralph Sleeger was one of the few cadets who pursued an Air Force career, but that proved especially beneficial to 5.77. In later years, when serving in Edmonton, Sleeger was instrumental in bringing Air Force transports to give familiarization flights to the squadron. And 1975 also brought back an original but neglected feature, the admission of 12 girls to the squadron. The story goes that it took an act of parliament to reauthorize women's full participation in cadets. But soon girls from Beaver Lodge, Wembley, and the city had joined, and a local female pilot, Mrs. G. Park, became a civilian instructor. Cadet Norman Driver found himself in the new and unfamiliar role of introducing the new girls to squadron drill. In the 1960s and 70s, but especially in the 1980s, squadron women made their mark, emerging as high achievers. Notable among many during those years was Sergeant Alice Cook, who attended technical training camps at Canadian Forces Base Borden, achieving the highest grade and the Sword of Honor for her achievements from a field of cadets from across the country. In 1981, Cook earned her powered flight wings and pilot's license. Though the academic and personal standards to qualify for air training were high, 577 has established a consistently high level of achievement to match them, especially in flying scholarships since Robertson's day. Cadet Robert Pardell earned his powered flight wings in 1979. Sergeant Ian Langdon at Rivers, followed by several others who trained on gliders at Gimli, Manitoba, and Robert Campbell won the Elmira Scholarship as top glider pilot in the Prairie region in 1982. By then a young cadet, Bryan Lynch was showing so much promise as a glider enthusiast that few were surprised when, after completing his education in Edmonton, Lynch returned to work in Grande Prairie to become a key figure in squadron training for glider flight. He also became a leader in the Duke of Edinburgh Award Program. The steady stream of cadets to glider school, such as Shannon Moncrief, and later to powered flight, proved the value of squadron training. Cadet squadrons thrive when former cadets return to give back. providing leadership and experience and skills which give depth and stability to their units. Looking at group pictures over the years reveals the gradual transition of young cadets from the most junior ranks up through the ranks to senior positions until eventually they reach the highest level, age out, and sometimes return as instructors. This was especially true of Bryan Lynch and Murray Driver and others, who Lynch, as a flight sergeant, went off to Cold Lake Camp for senior leadership course and proceeded in 1981 to glider pilot training. Similarly, Tracy Biron became a senior cadet leader, completed gliding instruction, and continued as Lieutenant Hartman, commander of 577 for the last 5 years. Lynch has now taken over as commander of the squadron. Former Cadet Dunn continued to build the squadron's skills with energetic promotion and recruiting, which led to great squadron growth in the 80s. In 79 and 1980, also a new piece of aviation history was brought online. A wartime Link trainer was put back into service. An early mechanical flight simulator for blind flying, first used in the Commonwealth Air Training Plan, the Link was a gift from the Flying Club, with blown bellows and needing other refurbishing, including an 18-foot ceiling clearance, and with real radium in the dials, which eventually led to withdrawal of the Link by safety officers. But at the time, to cadets, it was an exciting opportunity to learn instrumentation and keep flying under the hood, as they say. Cadets eagerly sought out time to practice in the cranky old simulator. Powered flight scholarships have been offered by cadets for decades, and those such as Shannon Moncrief, Dwayne Dahl, and Arbor Campbell have received top honors and provincial honors. Campbell, in fact, received the RCMP flying trophy. Great interest developed when the Cadet League proposed adding parachute training, and some cadets took the ground preparation course, though actual jumping never took place. In 1980, new ground was broken when Corporal Lance Assel attended the 4-week junior leaders course at Penhold Summer Camp. Despite his cane and mobility challenges, Assel was recognized as the top male cadet on the course and was awarded the Colonel's Choice Interprovincial Award in swimming. In hindsight, his contribution to the squadron lasted long after he had graduated. 577's culture of acceptance and accommodation for youth, challenged but eager to achieve, has continued through the years, providing a level playing field where cadets are evaluated solely on their merits, for their achievement and hard work, as more than one ex-cadet can attest from their own experience. A remarkable feature of 577 history has been the contribution of families, of sets of brothers and sisters from the Sask boys on, whose families contribute a stable core and heritage as they progress from oldest to youngest up through the years, and in some cases their children return to join the squadron. During the 1980s, a new feature of squadron identity was developed, the Dragon Rider name and badge. In order to accurately represent the Royal Crown, maple leaf, squadron name, and Royal Canadian Air Cadet logo, a new pattern was authorized in Ottawa, which would include a squadron motto and a badge design. The announcement created a vigorous discussion and several drafts, as you can see, of what the Dragon Rider symbol should look like. The final appearance is on the right. During the 1980s, the Carlson brothers made their mark, especially Geordie, with his fascination with aviation mechanics. Wearing the now green uniforms, Geordie built his own collection of gliders and other home builds, which led him to a post-cadet career as an aviation entrepreneur. At the same time, other cadets, like Carlo Huckabee, were qualifying in glider flying and glider training, though not always proceeding on to military or civilian aviation careers. Under Squadron Commander Guest, winter bush survival courses were growing, led by civilian instructor at the time Fred Weir, who in 1983 added canoe trip adventures in training. Though the atmosphere involved serious sessions on how to survive in the bush after an aircraft accident, there was always time for some fun and some stunts, which created memories and campfire tales and some very interesting photographs for later years. Survival training, first aid, evacuation skills, all these things were featured. The squadron also continued to achieve in compulsory and precision drill. They developed a drum and bugle band, assisted here as hot air balloon race servants, and in winter outdoor camping at places like Bald Mountain. Those years in the 80s, therefore, were ones of high participation and high achievement. This was the period when RCAF Captain Don Fish, based in Edmonton, became the squadron liaison officer and was notorious for bringing up twin otters from the search and rescue squadron based in Namao to give familiarization flights, an unorthodox and not entirely sanctioned practice by authorities, but which kept up the enthusiasm of cadets, including future pilots and instructors such as Dwayne Dahl, Corey Lambert, Carlo Huckabee, and others who would qualify as private pilots. Later, Ralph Sleeger, an alumnus serving as RCF liaison to 577, would provide more aircraft for familiarization flying, while the drill team again dominated the parade square. The years of the 80s also included close work with Station Beaver Lodge. The RCAF's 60th anniversary, in fact, led to the squadron celebrating both that anniversary and their own success by parading at RCAF Station Beaver Lodge and continuing to produce top-rated gliding and powered flight graduates, Tracy Biron and Nadine Puckett, for example. The eventual closing, however, of Beaver Lodge Station removed a vital source of expertise and transport from both Beaver Lodge and 577. Local cable net owner Ron Thieker, an enthusiastic promoter of cadets, facilitated the merging of Beaver Lodge Squadron with 577 so that the cadet work there would not suffer. The result was a large cadet citizenship tour to the Edmonton Air Show, the Reynolds Museum Aviation Collection in Wetaskiwin. Under Thieker, 577 continued to grow from a cadre small in the beginning to a squadron of 122 cadets by 1988. In 1984, Nadine Puckett, first of three sisters, initiated the Puckett Sisters Contributions and Aviation Achievements, winning the scholarship to take glider training at Gimli. When her turn to qualify arrived in 1989, Sister Nadine was able to witness and photograph her sister Lisa's first solo flight at Penhold Gliding School. Each in their turn, the three Puckett sisters, like the Sask brothers, demonstrated leadership which brought them to prominence and proved, if anyone still needed evidence, that girls were sometimes more competent to lead successfully than boys. By the mid-1980s, all three Puckett girls, as well as by then the Neudorf sisters, and the Schultz brothers and siblings from other families too, and Tracy Biron, linked with the squadron, were reaching top cadet ranks and distinguished themselves in gliding and flying and squadron leadership in particular. Former Commander Byron Dumont took charge of the range and marksmanship program. Dwayne Dahl was now coordinating familiarization flying, and in fact, aircraft were leaving regularly from the Grande Prairie Airport, introducing young cadets to their first experience in the air. At the same time, the cadets were involved in the Rotary Cleanathon in the spring, assisting in the spring cleaning of the city, which always ended with the famous hot dog barbecue. Rotary also supported and extended the simulator program, and the time and energy put by Bill Beattie and later Paul Galway into support for the Air Cadet League at zone and provincial level played a significant role in the life and the profile of the squadron. One way the squadron could reciprocate for its faithful support by Rotary was to promote its role as sponsor, as well as take part in its community benefit programs. Another way to thank the community involved providing color parties for parades and sentries for the cenotaph on Remembrance Day, a tradition that went back to the 1950s. In 1985, the squadron also signed an agreement with the Grande Prairie Soaring Society, and support from the Army, Navy, and Air Force Veterans Chapter also was initiated at this time. The Soaring Society's interest in cadet gliding owed much to Walter Mueller, who had been a gliding cadet himself in his youth back in Germany, while Bryan Lynch, along with Don Fish, acquired a powerful winch and an airstrip at Donnelly for glider instruction. 1987 was a highlight for many cadets when the new squadron commander Ron Thieker invited former cadet Robert Pardell to visit the squadron. By now a flying instructor at Moose Jaw with the RCAF, Pardell brought a CL-41 Tudor jet to the Grande Prairie Airport and provided the squadron with detailed up-close cockpit tours and briefings on Air Force flying. For those who remembered the high-spirited cadet in those early years, it was a satisfying outcome which justified their efforts for cadets. Thus, it was an especially sad day the next summer when the Air Force announced that Pardell had been killed in crash at Moose Jaw. The Pardell family has created a memorial scholarship for cadets entering flight training, which is awarded at the annual inspection and parade each year. Another event facilitated by the Air Force was the parade and inter-squadron sports competitions, sometimes at Station Beaver Lodge and sometimes during squadron tours of Cold Lake Air Force Base. By then, in the late 80s, 577 had returned to the familiar Air Force blue after more than a decade in the bottle green tunics and trousers which were supplied after the Armed Forces unification took place in the 1960s. Few regretted the end of the green and the return of the blue, both in cadets and in the Air Force. 1989 saw command of the unit being taken up by Ron Thieker, whose two children would play a leading role as cadets and as alumni. Now, over the next 5 years, Thieker promoted the squadron and involved it in several high-profile community activities, such as providing color parties for visits by provincial officials and sponsoring the performance of Billy Bishop Goes to War in the local theater. In hindsight, these highly visible community appearances could only raise awareness and support for the squadron during the years that 577 faced one of its greatest challenges, losing their home, the D Company Armory. It had been half a century since the drill hall, rifle range, and parade square had been built, and inspectors condemned it in 1989. Considering the estimates of at least $162,000 to make the roof safe and upgrade other aspects, 13th June 1989, the Grande Prairie City Council voted to demolish the building. At a tense council meeting, a chorus of community users rose in protest. With support from the Legion and Army cadets, Paul Galway, who had trained in the Armory himself, was a spokesman for the squadron, pointing out that suggestions to use the school gym for drill would destroy the wooden floors and make it impossible for cadets to march in proper cadence. The existence of a cement floor was essential for drill. On 20th June, faced by representatives and representation from at least 75 cadets, parents, former cadets, and other groups, including a petition organized by a first-year cadet with 200 names on it, the demolition plan was put on hold. November 10th, steel reinforcements were put under the rafters, which you can see in some photographs of the squadron from the winter of 1990, while the Legion offered to take the Armory over and develop it as a cadet headquarters and historical museum. In April 1990, the solution to save the Armory was found. The Decoy Armories Foundation, headed up by veteran Bill Bowes and Fred Dobbin, became a charitable association with several community service clubs, including Rotary, the Legion, and the different cadet organizations, which all agreed to take over management of the next 20 years. By fall, the renovations were underway, with money raised by cadet sponsor agencies, cheered on by other members of council and community leaders who themselves had often, like Galway, trained in the Armory in their youth. June 1991 saw the rededication, managed by the Legion and highlighting a parade of cadets, Army and Navy veterans, as well as the RCMP. Thieker also completed the process of completing the squadron crest, here presented at mess dinner, which gave it the final form of the Dragon Rider motto, Dragon Rider emblem, with the officially sanctioned crown, maple leaf, and heraldry. By 1995, ex-cadet Ralph Sleeger, still a Squadron RCF liaison officer to 577, was able to support the squadron by facilitating familiarization flights with 408 Squadron's twin Huey tactical aircraft. This also included some aviation instruction in helicopters for Bryan Lynch, up until then a gliding specialist. At the same time, Paul Galway, a Grande Prairie Rotarian, had taken over as director of the zone. Looking back, the mid to late 1990s were a period of growth and consolidation for 577. The public profile was heightened when newly retired Air Force General Scott Clemens presided as reviewing officer at the 1996 annual inspection and review. At the same time, retired Captain Don Fish, who had built the Regional Gliding Center at Donnelly, was acknowledged by a special award, and it became a fall tradition to bring the cadets, especially the new ones, up to Donnelly for glider flying and instruction with Lynch and Don Fish, and in this case, other cadet officers as well with flying credentials. Success in Zone's drill competition perpetuated and was continued in the near dominance of the parade square, especially in silent precision drill, for which Grande Prairie became famous and somewhat dreaded by the other squadrons. Their success at Zones was rewarded in 1991 by transport in an RCAF aircraft to provincial championships in Medicine Hat, where Lisa Puckett led the squadron team. Awards in basketball, marksmanship, and junior volleyball also resulted from this trip. Carolyn Puckett received the Snowbird Flying Scholarship as top cadet in Alberta. The year of achievement, however, began on a sad note, as former commander and range instructor Byron Dumo passed away tragically at age 33. In 1992, leadership moved from Thieker, who was retiring, to Bryan Lynch, a former cadet, gliding mentor, and eventual leader of the Duke of Edinburgh Award Program in the North. Carlo Huckabee, recipient of the Pardell Memorial Scholarship, went on to gliding that summer, with Carolyn Puckett qualified for exchange visits. Puckett completed the year as fully qualified glider and private aircraft pilot, scoring the highest Ministry of Transport examination grades. As Thieker relinquished command, it was clear that in 1992 his years of promotion of the squadron had yielded good results. The family connection in 577 continued, as Jennifer Thieker, daughter of Ron Thieker, became a cadet leader in the squadron, and Thieker's son Adam, who was right behind, took his place as well. The unit placed highly in both provincial and zone competitions, and two more sisters, Connie and Angela Newdorf, rose to positions of leadership. The Legion Medal of Excellence went to Brian Byrne. A contribution by two cadets to assist as pallbearers at the funeral of a former cadet's family was also greatly appreciated as a gesture of sympathy from the squadron. In 1994, gliding received a boost with sympathetic coverage in the Herald Tribune featuring Ryan Powell and recognizing the value of the linkage to the local soaring society. Powered flight instruction saw Amanda Tyler proceed to flying school at Saskatoon that summer. And so 577 continued its annual round of muster, drill, instruction, study for camp qualifications, survival exercises, bands, and drill training with the occasional mess dinner thrown in. A highlight was the winter visit and familiarization flights. And, of course, in the summer camps, the gathering of all its cadets in the large parade at Penhold. Cadets who went, either as training cadets or later, in fact, as staff cadets, were able to witness the spectacle of several hundred cadets on parade, color parties representing all the parts of Canada, inspection by senior officers, all done under the watchful eye of family. It was, perhaps, for some of them, the largest demonstration of how big and how significant the cadet movement was in Western Canada, especially when they could look and see here and there through the controlling officers, members of their own squadron who had achieved rank and were now, in fact, staff and leadership positions at Penhold. As another cadet, former cadet and officer, Kent Horoshko, took over the squadron, a lot of attention was put in place for the squadron simulator. The computerized flight simulator was configured as a Cessna light aircraft, and cadets were given a taste of ground school flying experience, which had not been enjoyed since the old link had been taken away by safety-minded Air Force officials. Soon, alumni Dwayne Dahl was spearheading the provision of more advanced trainer configuration with an F-16 fighter jet simulator. The simulators were trickier than they looked to maintain, but they were a source of pride, especially when visitors were encouraged to try their hand. And one could see distinguished simulator pilots looking over the shoulder of visiting guests, wondering how, in fact, they would handle the challenge of landing a Cessna on a screen. With Lance Assel returning as a Rotary representative, other squadron success occurred in drill. Lisa Puckett became a civilian instructor. Daniel Silito, C.J. Senko, Connie Newdorf returned as alumni, her coaching the drill team to zone championships in precision drill yet again. And during the winter, with calmer air always making it a good time to familiarize new flyers with jumpy stomachs, and cadets assisting in fundraising and distribution of hampers to Weyerhaeuser employees, the squadron kept busy. After Remembrance Day, in fact, the squadron was given a tour of a landed C-130 transport aircraft, maintaining their link with the squadrons in the South. By the dawn of the new century, the Air Cadet movement in Canada had included over 1 million youth in its ranks. In a general survey that year, just under 30% of the Air Force acknowledged Air Cadet experience, including 577 ex-cadet Clayton Shep. Approximately 63% of commercial pilots and 20% of those with private pilot's licenses also had Air Cadet background. The Canadian Armed Forces was going through a process of reevaluation and modernization of the entire cadet movement through a way-ahead movement, a process that endeavored making cadets a household word in Canada. In September 2000 came one of the squadron's greatest achievements. That September, 577 was rated the top squadron in Alberta and would be rewarded by a future citizenship tour of RCAF Comox, headquarters of search and rescue in Western Canada, and where the Snowbirds often did training flying as well. Leading the squadron was a new leader, Ken Rowley, and a squadron which had grown to 112 cadets. Rowley, like Thieker, would be another leader of entrepreneurial and administrative gifts. The next year, 2 cadets went to glider and powered flight instruction, and a cadet was appointed to the national drill team. Zones resulted again in first-rate performances and a small group participating in the noted Grand Cache Wilderness Challenge, and for the first time, the squadron mounted a biathlon team, bringing cross-country skiing and marksmanship together. Community service involved assisting the Rotary and Salvation Army food drive, the spring greenathon, and color guards for Remembrance Day. Through all of these activities, the consistent attendance and training of cadets living west of Grande Prairie and in Beaver Lodge depended on the Army-Navy van driven by Mr. Peter Grant. Rowley was quick to credit the hard work of his leaders, of his cadets, and of the parents, as well as the Legion and the Rotary. The service clubs and all had made 2001 a banner year of achievement in the squadron. But after the routine fall program, it became clear that he was preparing and fundraising for one of its most ambitious citizenship tours. Travel to Colorado and Denver to Fort Carlson and NORAD headquarters underneath Cheyenne Mountain. While many cadets did participate in the tour of Comox, RCAF base, which was laid on at the same time, the larger component departed in 2 coaches for the United States later in the spring. A visit en route to Little Bighorn brought a sobering reminder of past historical tragedies, followed by tours of the U.S. Olympic Training Facility and the United States Air Force Academy, and finally Fort Carson, before the rare tour of NORAD's highly guarded Cheyenne Mountain facility. The cadets, with their pilot's wings, discovered they were the envy of the American Air Force cadets, who were amazed that teenage Canadian cadets already had their wings. while for others, reminders of the troubles in their home countries of origin brought back memories of their own trip and their pilgrimage to Canada and the welcome they received in 577. Rowley's leadership philosophy was based on facilitating broader education and mature growth by exploration, travel, and a passion to achieve. After the Colorado and Comox trips, he began to plan another tour of citizenship and military facilities in Ottawa that ended in Kingston, another trip to Winnipeg to tour the operational headquarters of the Canadian Air Division was laid on, and, of course, familiarization flights, this time with the Griffin out of Whitecourt, introduced some more cadets to tactical flying in a helicopter. Before leaving in 2002, 2 squadron officers, along with 2 long-serving Army cadet officers, received their Canadian Forces Service Medals for over 12 years of creditable service to the Armed Forces. Ken Rowley, promoted to Major, and Captain Bryan Lynch, now commanding the Gliding Center, were 2 who received their special award, while Dan Lemke received a special Pardell Memorial Scholarship at a Wings Parade that fall. During that winter, as well as participating in the Santa Claus Parade and the Air Cadet senior leaders were then drafted to provide security for the National Championship Curling Skins tournament that was held in Grande Prairie that year. Spring 2002 featured the Army and Navy cadets hosting joint annual inspection, and during the next summer, a number of senior cadets served in staff positions during the summer camp at Penhold, which concluded with a mass parade. 2003 saw Ken Rowley's last year with the squadron, as a move promotion in his civilian occupation took him to Edmonton, but not before the anticipated 577 trip to Ottawa and Kingston. Bivouacking in the historic Connaught Range, in near Arctic temperatures, the cadets visited aviation museums and historical sites, the Parliament buildings, and other places of national interest before travel to Royal Military College in Kingston. Cadets returned with a wider sense of the national picture of Canadian society and its defense. In 2004, command evolved from Major Rowley to Major Lloyd Shirk, retired Air Force officer and civilian aviation consultant. He brought regular service time with tactical helicopter operations, including time with NATO postings in Europe, to the squadron. Along with routine training, service, marksmanship range, and gliding exercises, the squadron also achieved a bronze standing in biathlon. Again, 577 excelled in drill, winning first place at zones in both compulsory and precision drill, as well as in junior sports. That summer saw Colonel Wiens, commander of the South, to fly himself to Grande Prairie in a CL-41 Tudor to preside as inspecting officer. And that year there was another handover in command, as Lieutenant Louise Zemaev, former supply officer, took over 577, the first of 4 successive female commanding officers.
This week, the Royal Canadian Air Squadron 577 held their annual inspection, but this year's final event also marked a new beginning for Air Cadets in Grande Prairie, as a new commanding officer was welcomed into the squadron. Former Lieutenant Louise Zemaev is the first woman to take the position of commanding officer in Grande Prairie's 51st year Air Cadet history. Zemaev has been involved with cadets for 10 years and says that she's looking forward to the new challenges ahead of her.
You know, it's kind of scary, but by the same token, I think it's a real privilege. This is such an awesome squadron, and it is such an awesome program that, you know, a person just has to feel that it's a privilege to be in front of those kids and leading them and guiding them, and the staff as well.
The Canadian cadet movement began in the 1940s as a recruitment tool to get young men to join the military. Females didn't become involved in the program until 1975. Although the purpose of the cadets has changed over the years, the main elements remain the same.
The purpose is not to put them into the military now, but it's to create good leaders and good citizens for the country, but also to give them an interest and give them a side of the military, the flying side of it, of course, because we are air cadets. So that's what it's about now. We do a lot of citizenship stuff, we do a lot of leadership stuff, physical fitness, and the kids just come out. It's a really awesome youth program that's a lot of fun.
As in previous years, training in 2005 required more than the cadre of uniformed officers and instructors. Each year, several alumni return to give leadership, such as Jeff Bush, Mike Zamaev, Danielle Silito, Josh Clausen-Vavrik, and Dan Lemke. During the year, the squadron held a large winter bush survival exercise, and the team went to the provincial biathlon competition held in Grande Prairie. Spring saw a major citizenship tour, a trip to Victoria and Esquimalt Naval Base. The trip exposed the cadets to railway travel through the Rockies, tours of various sites in Victoria, including the legislature, and a tour of Esquimalt Naval Base with a visit, tour, and presentation by officers of HMCS Algonquin, where the naval culture's differences and service conditions, especially confined space, were an eye-opener to the Air Force cadets. Later that summer, cadets assisted at the 2005 Grande Prairie Air Show. After several busy years in 2006 and 2007, another ex-cadet serving with the RCMP detachment, Brandy Boychuk, took over 577, infusing again new energy. By 2009, the squadron was winning again in zone drill competitions, demonstrating that drill was indeed a team activity that required self-discipline, attentiveness, steadiness, and building confidence. Such successes showed the continuing influence of drill competitions in squadron culture, as leadership by example as well as precept characterized the team. As well, the steady stream of powered flight candidates continued, gliding candidates, and other cadets qualified for camp, while the biathlon team carried on a strong performance. The years flew by in the last decade of 577 life. A new aerospace course at Gimli was mounted and 2 cadets attended that, and 577 took first in male biathlon at zones and placed 4th at provincials. 1 cadet, brand new to the sport, was sent to the national team, a feat which he would repeat on 2 more occasions. Again, at zones, the squadron dominated drill, now 12 years undefeated in precision, and placed highly in marksmanship. Squadron placed 2nd in zone sports. And 2011 brought new challenges and achievements. A large invitational band and drill competition in Calgary led to placing the 577 band at the top, being invited to play in the Calgary Stampede, leading with 577's band leader in charge. The band became a new and prestigious component of the squadron, contributing to squadron growth from just under 8 in the band to 100 in the squadron and 18 to 20 members in the band. 2012 brought another exciting citizenship opportunity, this time to Europe, as 65 Army and Air Cadets from 577 and the Army Cadet Unit traveled to the battlefields of World War I at the Somme and Vimy Ridge. The editor of the Daily Herald Tribune facilitated the fundraising by inviting cadets to sell subscriptions and donated a portion of the travel fund, while the Rotary contributed a large grant. At Beaumont Hamel, scene of the Newfoundland Regiment's sacrifice, Army cadets laid a wreath, while the GP Air Cadets carried the signature quilt in parade through the village of Guillanchy-en-Goël on their way to Vimy. Morgan Weevil received the newest Air Cadet League Award, the David Hornell Air Search and Rescue Scholarship, to further his aviation training, and Tyler Chappell received the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal. 213 saw the squadron celebrate its 60th anniversary with a large mess dinner, bringing back alumni and former officers from all over Western Canada. 3 cadets also received pins from the Duke of Edinburgh's award. Another public recognition of the excellence of the squadron's band and drill team came during the military Calgary Tattoo, when they were invited to participate. Though it had struggled over the years as interest and the number of cadets with instruments and instrumental background rose and fell, by now the band had become an established part of squadron life. 2014 saw the new tradition of major international travel carry on as the citizenship tour that Boychuk led took the squadron to the United States Northeast seaboard. A total of 44 cadets visited historical, naval, and military sites in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington. The cadets, besides the fun and adventure of foreign travel, had their perspective and historical knowledge considerably enlarged. Already that winter, the biathlon team had taken the bronze medal in the provincial cadet competition in Camrose. As a new RCMP posting moved Commanding Officer Boychuk out of Grande Prairie, command fell to Tanya Owens. The 2015 annual inspection saw Tara Nazedkin awarded the Legion Medal of Excellence and the Miller Memorial Award. 2 other cadets had already received Duke of Edinburgh awards from the Lieutenant Governor at the Edmonton ceremony. Captain Bryan Lynch was also honored when the Duke of Edinburgh personally presented him with the Prince Philip Award for his 20 years of service. Under Owen's leadership, the autumn survival exercise, dubbed Operation Red and Gold, was held jointly with 755 Squadron. 2 cadets were sent to Ottawa for a leadership symposium. Along with the winter biathlon competition, the squadron placed highly, as was usual, in drill and band, as well as effective speaking at the provincial competitions, and placed 3rd in the marksmanship provincial range contest. 5 received from Prince Edward Duke of Edinburgh awards, including the gold pin at the Edmonton ceremony. Trips for training and citizenship were carried out to Moose Jaw and Edmonton. Glider scholarships examinations were held, drill and sports, biathlon competitions, and another extensive spring survival exercise, as well as a 2-day competition in survival skills, were conducted too. Some also participated in a joint trip to Italy with 755 Squadron. 2 cadets also qualified for the Duke of Edinburgh Awards. It was a time of steady accomplishment and pride, with a strong squadron identity. The 2018 annual inspection brought back a special guest and reviewing officer. As one of the first 577 cadets, retired Chief Warrant Officer Stan Monkman arrived as inspecting officer. With his brother Wayne, Monkman had joined the squadron in 1954, later graduating into a military career with the Air Force. By then, Tracy Hartman, who as Tracy Biron had been a cadet in the 1980s, was in command, the 4th female commander at the squadron in succession. Hartman teamed up with Tanya Owen, now a captain, and other cadet alumni such as Wes McGee and Taryn Nazedkin, and a handful of civilian instructors who lent their expertise in various aspects of familiarization flying, biathlon training, supply and administration, as well as having Lynch and other officers carry out the training and competitive aspects of the schedule. A visit, along with several other squadrons, to 4-Wing Cold Lake also provided Air Force awareness and training for senior cadets. 2019 carried on the squadron routine. Fall awards and wings nights, along with survival exercises, a senior trip to Edmonton, mess dinner in formal attire, the traditional full-scale annual inspection and displays, biathlon and band, all of them a continuation of a strong squadron tradition that had begun 69 years before. Observing a parade night, talking to cadets, it's easy to hear the groans when something tough has to be repeated until it's done right. One hears the laughter, and on their canteen break, the stories and laughter over survival exercises, the colorful characters, and the usual camp stunts, and especially the food. But everyone's dead serious when it comes to preparing for annual inspection, the drill competitions meeting the high standards under the eyes of respected community leaders who seem not to miss a thing. It's more than just getting into the air, though to fly a glider or lighter aircraft is always everyone's secret dream. But there's more. Cadets memorize the motto, to learn, to serve, and to advance. To learn that there are standards which are very worth meeting. To interact and to learn from officers and leaders who are willing to devote their hours, days and summers to help them improve, and knowing that most of their leaders once were cadets themselves, who get it. And to know their parents' committees are behind them too. Parental faithfulness, cheerfulness, willingness to drive them is essential to act as chaperones and to contribute their own skills from first aid to administration. That, along with a dependable and dedicated Rotary sponsor, which will call on them from time to time to brief the club on squadron and personal progress. And yes, there is a standard to be met. Cadets may seem to be carefree and fun-loving, but many will become leaders who will impart standards of dress and drill as part of their teamwork that is a squadron. One can imagine the question from a warrant officer, what would happen, cadet, if everyone turned up for parade with socks like that? Because a squadron is a team. And a squadron is a family, which takes pride in each other's members' accomplishments. And a squadron is a community, which takes in the youth in one time and place, and every year gives back to the community young leaders who have acquired confidence, a wider vision, a greater sense of the country, its foundations, and their own place in it. So that even when they reach the age where they must move on to other things, the cadet experience, the discipline that gave them wings, remains, and always with the pride of achievement. For 70 years, 577 has been that community within our community.